Hello, and here we are again for another bold and honest session at London's largest and most affordable workspace, the Ugli campus. I actually say that, I mentioned that today, because today we are finding out all about one of our charities in the building. Duchenne UK, we will be lifting the lid on what it's really like to be a passionate founder and operator of a charity doing great work in a tough environmental landscape. I'm JP, I'm joined by Clwyd again from Whitehat, who is going to assist us with the broadcasting of the podcast. And we're very, very happy to chew the cud today with Emily Reuben. Emily, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
It's an absolute joy. Can you tell us a little bit about, and obviously we know you, but for everybody listening, tell us about Duchenne, tell us about some of the charity's challenges and currently what you're faced with from today.
Wow, that's quite a big question. I mean, I hadn't heard of Duchenne 9 years ago. I was happily going about my life. I was a correspondent and presenter for Channel 4 News and CNN. And then one day, completely out of the blue, my eldest son, Eli, was diagnosed with Duchenne muscular dystrophy, and he was 3.5 at the time. And I will never, ever forget that day of diagnosis because we were sitting in a tiny room with the paint peeling off the walls, and the consultant said to me, your son has Duchenne and he is dying. It's a very severe muscle wasting disease. It's caused by a genetic fault on the largest gene in the body, mainly affects boys, and the prognosis is that he will be in a wheelchair by the time he's 12 or 13. He'll be completely paralysed by the age of 18 or 19, and life expectancy is early 20s. And I really wish at that moment they had given me a diagnosis of your world is collapsing condition, or, unremitting grief syndrome. I really wish the consultant had said to me, Emily, you are going to have to make yourself strong, because you are going to have to hold your son's hand, and watch him slowly waste away and somehow try and make that okay for him. And I think that is the biggest burden of all on the parents and the family. This diagnosis affects not just the child, but the whole family. So my husband and I were distraught for a number of months. But then, we started to speak to people, and we actually began to feel quite hopeful that there was a lot of research going on out there. And if only we could fund some clinical trials, we could maybe bring treatments to this generation. So we set up Duchenne Children's Trust at the time, and then in 2016 we merged with another charity, joining Jack, to form Duchenne UK, and now we're the largest funders of Duchenne research in the UK, and we've invested something like £14 million in research in the last 7 years. Up until now, we've had no one in charge of fundraising, so it's been a huge undertaking for myself and my co-founder Alex. And we really haven't stopped in those 8 years, and it's been exhausting. It takes a huge toll on you, not just because every day you're going home to your son who still has Duchenne, and my 2 other daughters who are beautiful and incredible, and try to make a normal, happy, wonderful home for them, whilst at the same time feeling this horrendous ticking clock on my shoulder that I have to do something now, yesterday, this morning, this afternoon, to try and find treatments, for Duchenne. And we are making extraordinary progress. This is a hugely exciting time. But for myself and for families with boys with Duchenne, it can never happen fast enough, and that's what keeps me awake at night, really.
It's an incredible story. I mean, you're 8 years in from that horrific news in that room. Where would you say the most progress has been made, not just for you as an individual and as a mother, and the progress you make as a family collectively, and that's just a huge, huge story in itself, but from the charity's perspective, where do you see that you've had the most impact in the last 8 years?
Well, I suppose, to go back to your point earlier about the Ugli building being a sort of disruptor to the model, I feel like Duchenne UK really is a disruptor to the model. So there were certain things that we were told when Eli was diagnosed that wouldn't happen. So we were told that gene therapy would not happen in his lifetime. Mm-hmm. We didn't take no for an answer, so we raised $5 million. We invested it in a US biotech called Solid Biosciences. And last year they dosed their first patient with gene therapy. And they've dosed a number of boys since. And now Pfizer and another company, Sarepta, are now dosing patients with gene therapy. So we felt like we helped to accelerate that into the clinic. People said to us, no. Charities don't fund doctors and nurses in the NHS. That's the NHS's job. Again, we didn't take no for an answer because we felt that we needed to fund the doctors and nurses in order to bring more clinical trials into the UK, because 4 years ago my co-founder and I found out they were turning away clinical trials, and this is often a family's best hope. It's their lifeline. Can I get my son onto a clinical trial and he could potentially benefit from an experimental treatment? So we set up something called the DMD Hub. We invested £2 million, and we are now no longer turning away clinical trials. In fact, we have 200 more boys on clinical trials in the UK than we would have had if we hadn't set up the hub. Thirdly, people said to us, oh no, charities don't fund clinical trials. That's something that Big Pharma does. But we came across some very exciting research looking at tamoxifen, which is a breast cancer drug, but it had been tested in a mouse model for Duchenne and found to be very effective in helping protect the muscles. So we decided to set up our own clinical trial. We've invested £1.5 million.
Of course you did.
That trial is now in 9 countries in the UK, including 9 countries in Europe. Now we've got 3 sites in the UK, Leeds, Alderhay and Glasgow, who are running clinical trials, and boys in the UK are now taking part in that trial. We've also done many, many other things, but I think those are 3 examples of where the charity's been told it definitely couldn't do something, and we've tried to disrupt the model and show that it can be done.
Well done you. Well done you for not taking no for an answer. What would you say on a day-to-day basis? What's the thing that impacts you as a family the most? What's the thing that keeps you spurred on, that just keeps you, obviously, the well-being of your lovely boy, who's now what age?
He's 12 and a half now.
12 and a half. And, how is he?
It's, on the one hand, he's not on the one hand, he is an incredible child. He's the lead singer of a band. He's really engaged and active at school. He's a fantastic brother to his 2 sisters, and he's very popular, and he's got some really great friends. But the reality of Duchenne is that it's brutal, and it is a progressive disease, so he is getting weaker. And it's very, very painful to watch, not only for me as a mother, but for my mum and my mother-in-law as grandparents, as Nick as his dad. It's trying to, on the one hand, make the best life for him and have a certain amount of acceptance about Duchenne, but acknowledging that acceptance doesn't mean giving up, and that we will never give up on him and boys like him, and we will fight for huge gains, for incremental gains. We will fight every day. And sometimes it is hard, sometimes I really find it difficult to motivate myself. And, in the summer we had an awful situation where my son was attacked by a dog in the park and he broke his leg, and it was 50-50 whether he'd ever walk again. And, times like that, you really got to dig deep, and I've got an incredible team at the charity, very small team. There's only 4 of us in the office, which is incredible given how much money we raise and how much work we do. But they really stepped up. My co-founder Alex is extraordinary. She's based in Wigan, and she again completely stepped up to help me, and we pulled together as a community. I got messages from people all around the world seeing how Eli was, what can they do to help, and I suppose that's what keeps us going, is trying to keep a normal life as possible at home, and as loving and as fun as life embracing, whilst at the same time acknowledging what Duchenne actually is, how brutal it is, and how we have to get up every day and fight it.
You sound like you've got some brilliant people around you, and it gives you huge strength. I'm fascinated to learn more about your fundraisers and the work they do. I see you do triathlons, you're doing all these incredible things. I just want to get involved. How would somebody listening to this get involved more? How could they contribute? What could they give in terms of time or finance? Obviously you've got all of the normal Just Giving channels. What would you say is the thing that makes the difference the most that you'd like people to engage with?
Well, we do tend to use Virgin Money Giving, just to say that, because their fees are lower.
There we go.
We need people to fundraise for us, really. We are living in unprecedented, uncertain times, and we are going to have to diversify as a charity to ensure that those income streams continue. I actually did my first triathlon in September, and I raised, we raised, I think it was £40,000, which was fantastic, and some great families did that with us. So, sign up to any event that you like. You can nominate Duchenne UK as a charity, set up a direct debit, go onto our website. There's lots of, organised fundraising events that you can do. If you feel like you could raise £4,000, then contact us to join our bike ride London to Paris in 24 hours. We're the only charity who does it in 24 hours. We have some superly amazing people doing it. It's amazing VIP experience. We finish in Paris, we get a motorbike escort all the way through the streets of Paris. It's really phenomenal, and for the last 3 years that event has raised us £1 million a year, which is extraordinary, and again we have an amazing group of volunteers who help us get that off the ground. So it really is. It really does come down to the money, because the money is what gives you the ability to be able to think ambitiously and shoot for the stars and never say no. It comes down to fundraising and money.
Can I ask a quick question on that? Because I'm curious. I mean, I'm slightly biased because our world is digital, right? Are you using the social media channels to push that? Is that a big part of your fundraising efforts?
It is. We are a very small team, and all of the money we raise, we want to spend directly on research.
Absolutely.
So we don't really spend money on social media marketing, advertising, any of that. And we probably are missing out. We're probably missing a trick there. And up until now, I suppose we've relied on Facebook groups, word of mouth within the community, so that people within the community see the work we're doing and they fundraise for us. We don't typically go out and ask people for fundraise for us. We just say to people, this is what we are doing. We're very transparent. We are delivering this clinical trial. We are delivering these doctors. If you want to get involved, please do. We'd love you to. Because I suppose my co-founder and I, Alex, are very... we're parents at the end of the day. We know how vulnerable parents are. We know how hard it is for them, and we wouldn't want to ever pressurize them into doing something they didn't feel comfortable with. At the same time, we realize that it's going to take a global army to defeat this. It's going to take a community, and then the more people can help us, the better. So we try and approach it that way, but with Brexit and with the uncertainties that's posing, and the risks to our fundraising, we are going to have to start thinking differently and, looking at ways we haven't looked at before to help us fundraise.
Yeah, no, and digital is one way to do that. If you can find influencers, if you can find micro-influencers, people who are able to reach out to a particular community that you yourselves are often find it difficult to, then that can help. Other things like Google Grants. I'm not sure if you're using Google Grants for charity. That's often underutilized by a lot of charities. They don't realize how much money you can actually get, essentially for nothing. But it's the management of all of that, and it's always very difficult. I do quite a lot of work with animal charities.
Right.
This is interesting, actually. For me, my background was molecular genetics.
Oh, okay.
So it's was reading up about all of this again. So it's fascinating to see how the technology and the science is changing as well. Things like CRISPR technology coming through, gene editing. It's interesting to see it actually coming into the clinical world, like you said, which is from an academic perspective, it's fascinating, but suddenly it becomes personal when you meet somebody who's going through that. It just focuses your mind so much on it.
Well, it certainly focused our minds, and it focused us on what we wanted to achieve, which was to bring clinical trials to the UK to try and speed up the approval of medicines, basically. And you're right, things have speeded up to an incredible extent. And when Eli was diagnosed, there were only 2 or 3 clinical trials. I think there are now something like 48 clinical and preclinical trials. So, there is a lot of cause for optimism. But again, if you're a scientist looking at it dispassionately, things are moving fast. If you're a parent going home to your son every day, things can always move faster.
Absolutely.
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
What would you say for the next, say, let's just look 3 months ahead? Actually, that's one question I wanted to ask you, is how big is the community? How many people are diagnosed with Duchenne in the country?
In the UK, it's 2 families a week are given that news. So there's around 2,500 families in the UK with a child or young adult with Duchenne. And it is families, it's one of those diseases that has a profound impact, not just on the boy, but on the family. Many families I talk to, there's huge financial difficulties. Often one parent has to give up work. It can impact on siblings because their parents aren't as available to take them to things, to drive them to things. Siblings often end up having to go to hospital appointments with the child who has Duchenne. So it really has a huge impact. And this is one of the things we're trying to articulate now and measure. When it comes to drugs being approved, that's one thing. But the next phase that has to happen is that bodies like NICE have to then decide whether or not a drug is cost effective. And in order to decide whether a drug is cost effective, you need to really try and work out what the true burden of that illness is and the impact on the quality of life, not just on the patient but the caregivers. And this has been very difficult to quantify for Duchenne. So we set up a project a few years ago called Project Hercules, which is now winning awards around the world, actually, because we've for the first time brought together competing pharmaceutical companies to work together in this non-competitive space of, okay, what is the true cost of Duchenne? What is the true impact of Duchenne on the quality of life? And we thought we'd have 2 or 3 companies sign up. We've now got 9, including Pfizer and Roche, some of the biggest companies in the world. And we're hoping to finalise some of those work streams at the end of this year. So we will be able to really, rather than going to a room with NICE and cry and say, this is what the disease does to my son, we will be able to give them facts and figures and numbers and data that they need. I went to a meeting at the FDA a few years ago and they said, don't bring me a room full of crying mothers, bring me data. So we came back from the FDA, we got a room full of crying mothers, and we turned those tears into action, into numbers, figures, data that NICE can understand and will hopefully help them to make decisions more quickly about what drugs are cost effective.
Fantastic. I love the way you adopt, and I'm sure through nothing more than sheer survival. You're an amazing woman, and we've spoken lots on the subject before. I love the way you adopt this incredible positive kind of movement. You're constantly working hard. Tell me just a little bit about your team, your people around you. You're a small team and yet you're doing such incredible things. Tell me a little bit about them. Tell me a little bit about just the dynamics of that and how that's working out.
Well, we started off around the kitchen table, really, my husband and I, and an incredible group of trustees who gave their time and expertise for free and helped us raise $1 million in the first year and go on to be a really well-functioning, hugely well-governed charity. And we didn't really employ anyone for the first 2 or 3 years. And then most charities, I think, first of all employed a fundraiser, but we didn't do that. We employed a director of research. So the first 3 years we were funding 2 or 3 projects a year. When she came in, we went up to 17 projects. So we now have a different director of research, David. He works remotely in Norfolk, but I have a team here in the Ugli building of 4 incredibly intelligent, highly motivated and very, very dedicated staff. I think, they get a real sense of achievement working for a small charity and really seeing the fruits of their labour, and people are always staggered when they come to the office and they see me and my team, about how much we put out there. I mean, our website is a huge resource. We do family folders for newly diagnosed. We've got the Hercules website. We do these amazing fundraising events, and it's really a tiny team. And I think one of the things that they like is that they see, people who work for me, they know how careful we are with money. They know that families who fundraise for us do that, and it's hard for them. And they know that we are committed to as much money as we raise going into research, because at the end of the day I have to answer to my son and to boys of his generation. We don't want to have a fancy office. We want we don't want huge overheads, and this is why this building is so incredible for us, because we don't want to spend money on rent. We want to spend money on research, and we want to attract the best talent. We can't pay them necessarily commercial market rates, but we can say to them, come to a centrally located office. You've got Westfield on the doorstep. There are 2 different tube lines. When people come in for meetings, it's really easy to get here. It's important, and I want to look after my staff, and they want somewhere cool. They're young, they're cool, they want to work somewhere that's cool, that's close by, that's easy for them to go meet their friends after work. I can't offer them big salaries, but I can offer them job satisfaction, an opportunity to help us change the world in a small way, and somewhere nice to work. And we've been looking around the area now for accommodation, for office accommodation, and it's just breaking my heart, JP, because I'm looking at the costs, and I don't see how I'm slightly burying my head in the sand about it, because I feel so heartbroken about having to leave here, about having to say to my staff, right, we're going to have to go to Zone 2000 or whatever it is. I don't know. And will they stay with me? I mean, it is important for people where they work, where their office is, what the atmosphere is like. As I say, they don't want anywhere fancy. They just want somewhere that they feel comfortable, that's accessible, and that they want to come into work for every day. So that is my team. They are awesome. But I do really, really worry about how I can keep them and what the impact of us being thrown out of here will have on my staff retention.
Well, we speak about this a lot. You are, leaning on a massively open door, as you know. A big agenda is to just get more and more affordable workspace in London. This is the whole point about keeping overheads as low as possible so people can get on doing the business of business, whatever that might be. In your instance, particularly more pertinent and relevant because you have such purpose. You've got a team of people that are purposefully driven. They're making a difference. They're making it in a massive way in their small, tight, intelligent way that they're going about it. I love to see it happen. I love speaking to you about it, but it breaks my heart equally to think that we can't keep supporting that. We do it in any way that we can for the period of time that we can keep delivering that. But it's a real issue. It's a London-wide issue. We laugh about Zone 2000, but the reality is we need to be central and accessible, like you say. And there's a lot of empty space that is sitting around that people aren't using. This is the joy of being able to deliver Ugly, was that we didn't do the big shiny office. We did the affordability, the flexibility, and enabling businesses and charities like yours to do what it does and to just get on with that. And I'm so passionate about that, and I know you're equally as passionate about trying to retain that as well. So we're on the same mission together, and we can join purpose on that one. But what I love to hear is that energy that is generated around your cause. I love to hear about the people dedicated to it. I can see that you also do you still do the monthly sessions where you're educating people around the disease?
It's twice a year,
Okay.
We do patient information days.
Yes, and is that's increasing in terms of its impact, and it's having more, you're getting as much awareness as you can around that?
The last information day we had was in September. We had it in Manchester. We had more than 100 parents there, which is more than we've ever had. And the Mayor of Manchester, Andy Burnham, came. He's supported us a lot over the years because he used to be my co-founder Alex, who's based in Wigan. She worked with him when her son Jack was diagnosed, and he held a big roundtable meeting for us in the House of Commons to really try and accelerate the pace of research and bring trials here. So it was fantastic to see him, and he was really energised by the progress that we've made. I think families find those meetings really useful because at the end of the day, there is so much information on our website, but sometimes that can be overwhelming, especially if you're newly diagnosed. There's things you don't want to read at that moment of diagnosis. And sometimes you just want to meet someone, you just want to have a cup of tea, you just want to meet someone who's in your situation and somehow not feel so alone. And I think those patient information days are a really amazing opportunity for people to make those connections. And there was one man in particular who I met. Him and his wife came to our information day in London. We had it at Guy's Hospital in February. His son had just been diagnosed. He came to our patient information day. At that information day, Alex and I spoke to him. He found out about a clinical trial being run by a company called Catabasis. He found out that they were going to be running that trial at Evelina, which is a hospital that we fund. We're funding a doctor post and a nurse post there. And his son is now on the clinical trial. So incredible. He learnt that from the information day.
And that is, properly changing lives, properly making a difference. I could talk to you all day. Clwyd, have you got any more questions that you'd like to ask?
I'm just fascinated
Emily?
by it. I mean, also, I suppose maybe to throw something up that we've actually, JP, spoken about a little bit with many of the interviews that we've done here, is this problem of business growth, where you just start to become successful. You've got your processes in place, you're raising money, you've got a community, and then somebody hits you over the head with something that says you have to move out. Or this massive cost comes down on you, which you really, it's not in the plan, it's not there, it shouldn't be there. And instead of a smooth progression, you've got to climb a mountain just to even stay where you are. And I think that's the kind of thing that we're feeling a little bit with Ugly at the moment. We're going through the same thing. We're expanding, we're doing really well. We'd like to hire some more people, but then if we have to move out, that's going to hit our revenues. And you must be going through exactly the same thing. And once you're successful, you want to do more. You don't want to be dragged down by rents and overheads.
No, I mean it would feel like a hugely backward step.
Yeah.
My trustees are just delighted at how little we spend on office space, you know. And, you know, my trustees are completely dedicated, like I am, to supporting my staff and helping them thrive as much as they can and want to within Duchenne UK. So, you know, at the last board meeting, I did actually flag up that we're planning for this now. You know, our finance director knows about it. You know, we are starting to research, but it's just hugely depressing, you know, a time when everything else seems so uncertain. And it just feels, you know, as I say, like a backward step and a complete and utter waste of resources. Because unfortunately it's necessary, you need an office.
Yeah. You can go virtual to a certain extent, but particularly in a world like you're in, I think the personal interaction of a team working together is really, really important.
Well, and there's so much, you know, cross-section of what people do in my office. There's people ring up and they want information about something, so, you know, Molly will pick up the phone and go, or say over to Darla this, or Eleanor that, or, you know, we're constantly talking, especially in the lead up to a big event. You know, our bike ride in June, you know, pieces of work from that event fall onto everyone's lap. So we need to be in the same room. We need to be talking, who's done that, what's happening then. You know, there are periods of the year where we're really, really, really busy as a team, and the whole team inputs into things. You know, the patient information days we organise, that takes the whole team. So we do, you know, virtual working can work up to a point, but, you know, you need to be in the same office as people, and you need to interact.
Yeah, I note from what you're saying, some of your people are Norfolk, some are in London.
Yeah.
So you've got a variety of people working in various hubs, but it's that motivation of the team, like you say, it's like getting together, it's the one-to-one, it's the being in an environment, like you say, trying to retain that talent is a massive issue. And we've had members at Ugli before now saying, JP, the amazing thing is that instead of paying money on rent, I'm able to employ someone else.
Yes.
My team has grown exponentially because I haven't had this stronghold around my neck, or this kind of, you know, I've been in a headlock because I've been held back, because people, as we know, are what makes business. It's all about the people, and people do forget. I think landlords do forget, most definitely, that's the power, that's the energy. And retaining a young, creative, highly intelligent group of individuals like you're trying to do, it's not easy. It's not easy. And, you know, the more we can, you know, encourage landlords in London to think this way, and to not dine out so much on being the most creative capital in the world, but actually supporting that talent and getting behind it is
but I also think there needs to be a political will there as well to do it, because if you look at our charity, yes, we are a charity, but we also are, we're disrupting the model, and we're a business who, you know, thanks to our work, is bringing money into the UK. I mean, we are bringing clinical trials here. You know, we are bringing companies together. We are encouraging research. You know, we are contributing hugely to the economy.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we just wouldn't be able to do that, you know, if we weren't here.
Yeah.
So,
so in the same vein as the crying mothers, you know, it's that evidence, it's that research, it's having the data. It is something that I'm on a panel for the JLA that we're trying to bring this information forward to prove the economic value of actually, what if you are at a break-even point, that you don't increase people's rents and the rates can remain as low as possible, and then that does genuinely have that economic uplift of how far that company can go and how quickly. And this is what we need to be proving, this is what we need to be talking about, and this is what we need to be addressing in terms of the reuse and the upcycling of our buildings in London, many of which remain empty because landlords refuse to lower rents. You know, this is not good. There's
lots of shiny buildings, you know, there's one behind us, right, going up. And they're great. If you're an established company, you've got cash flow and all of these different things. And there's probably an awful lot of space out there for a single entrepreneur, right? If you want a desk, right, you can kick stuff off. It's that gap in the middle. It's you've proven the thing that you're doing. There's a market value for it. There's a passion for it in the team, and you want to put a small team together and grow. So you need a space where you can actually talk and you can meet, and that accelerated growth, I think, is a huge number of companies, and there's a cap on them. They're being held down, and governments talks about entrepreneurship. They talk about growth. But they're missing that early stage and it's so important.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. I think huge amount of support for a startup, a one-man band, office space, desk space, and then if you're the next big unicorn, then great. But anything in the middle, it's a real no man's land. I call it the sort of teenage businesses where you have enough kind of gravitas, you've got some traction, you're really evolving, and then suddenly you're left in the no grant space. You're left in the you can't possibly do this. You now need to go on a really grown-up contract, and by the way, we'll tie you in for 20 years or 10 years, and exponentially keep increasing your rent. So that is the real danger zone, I think, for businesses, and very, like Clwyd says, very unsupported.
So lack of flexibility, that's an interesting one, because I mean we've had a couple of interviews with companies in this building, right, who've expanded really rapidly. So they've signed a contract for so much office space, and then 6 months later they've said, oh well, actually we need double that.
Well, we started off in a 2-man office in Block A, then we moved to a 3-man office in Block B, and now we're back in a 5-man office or 6-person office in Block A again.
And that's the joy. That's the joy of just seeing you move around the campus, gradually but solidly expanding, step by step by step. And I mean, you're hitting way above your weight in terms of your 5-man office. You're doing things globally that are making such a phenomenal impact. But it's been a joy to watch that path. It's been a joy to be part of that growth in the tiny little way that we can be, and we're so delighted that we were and are still. And we're going to be tracking your progress the whole way. Fingers crossed we'll be here for as long as we possibly can, and it's just been a joy to watch that growth. So keep that energy up, keep that amazing passion and conviction that you hold. It's just such a joy to see it. You are an incredible example. I'm going to be talking to everybody like I normally do about Duchenne, and even more so now. I can think already, I think my 15-year-old will be cycling to Paris. I'm sure he'll be involved in that as a keen cyclist, and as a mother and as a fellow sort of resider of the Ugli campus. Thank you for coming and sharing your story with us. We really enjoyed speaking to you.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Emily. Cheers.
I felt like our world had ended. It was horrendous, because you start on the internet looking up what the condition is, and you realise that there is no cure, there is no treatment, and you've got your whole future mapped out for you before you've even started to live your life. It's horrendous. Darkest day of my life.
Alex and I first met when our sons were diagnosed, and we had 2 separate charities, and we ended up pretty much funding everything together, didn't we? We've got this awful race against time, and we thought, well, how can we make the biggest impact in the shortest amount of time? And the logical conclusion was to come together and form Duchenne UK. I think with our charity, you're getting 2 mothers, who are very well informed and who are coming at it absolutely from the perspective of the parent and the patient, to try and make every day count.
I think nobody more than us feels the pressure of time and knows the heartbreak of this disease on a daily basis. You've watched your child so lovingly learn to walk, to run, to jump, and then over time now we watch every single one of those things taken away from them.
I think what Alex and I are most passionate about is to give every child who is diagnosed with Duchenne the opportunity to take part in research in the UK. And we're working across all levels to do that.
Yeah, and that's the reason why we created the Duchenne Hub, to set up a network of clinical trial sites to provide those opportunities.
Working with Duchenne UK has been absolutely fantastic. I think they're a very creative organisation. They're really aspiring to do the best for patients and to bring high quality research to those patients and families. I can only say that one of the most inspirational groups I've ever worked with.
I think what's different about Duchenne UK is that we have a very innovative approach to funding research. For instance, there's a notorious valley of death in drug development where promising treatments languish on the shelf of a laboratory because there isn't enough money to take them into that first clinical trial, because that's the most risky part of the drug development pathway. What we've done is invested in 2 projects where we've put money into that risky early phase. We've created good clinical data, and off the back of that, those companies have brought in massive investment. So what we're really doing there is accelerating research by investing in the early risky phase, which then brings in the big money.
We're not scientists. We can't develop the cure ourselves. The only way we can help is by raising money to fund the trials and the development.
This is money that is really making a huge difference. You are changing lives with this amazing endeavour.
Although our son's got this horrendous condition, we feel that we have got this amazing hope through such an amazing charity.
There is hope now.
Yeah.
You know, with what Duchenne UK are doing as a charity, they give us the strength to carry on and believe that there will be a treatment one day to end Duchenne.